This is Collected Clan, episode 17.
But for me, the art is like my sacred place, and I don't want it to ever not be, because that's when it becomes something that I don't want it to be in my life. I don't want it.
Welcome to another edition of Collected Clan, the podcast featuring conversational biographies of relatable people with real stories of triumph and tragedy, plus successes and setbacks. I'm your host, Gregory Byerline. People often come and go, but these people are the company you keep. Everyday people making their mark. In our previous episode, I visited with Tony Caldwell, a renowned hairdresser, entrepreneur, and fantastic conversationalist. We talked about his first-hand experience behind the scenes at many New York fashion weeks, his path to owning his own salon, and how he approaches each individual client who comes to him to look their best. Plus, the fragility of the human body, the Me Too movement, and several other unexpected twists. Be sure you hear that conversation too. There's a bonus segment about how to detox your bathroom products, your shampoo and cosmetics, for our Producer Circle supporters on our Patreon page at patreon.com/collectedclan. That's spelled patreon.com/collectedclan. We are 100% listener supported here, and your financial support keeps these episodes commercial free with an emphasis on supporting nonprofit organizations selected by our guests. My guest today is Lauren Phelps. Lauren is an accomplished creative entrepreneur. I first knew Lauren as she achieved great success with her clothing line, Leona, then as a client when I had the opportunity to photograph several seasonal lookbooks of her fashion designs. She has continued her creative endeavors since then and now lives in New York, where she continued her work in fashion, then turned into an even deeper creative direction, which of course we talk about here. And as always, we feature a nonprofit spotlight selected by our guest. Visit the show notes to see photos of Lauren's work at collectedclan.com/Lauren Phelps and learn more about the nonprofit organization that Lauren supports. Kick back and enjoy this conversation with Lauren Phelps. Welcome to Collected Clan, Lauren.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to catch up. It's been a while.
It has been a while, and I was thinking back how we met, and I first heard the name, your maiden name, Lauren Leonard, through Nashville Fashion Week when you received an award. Tell me about that award.
The Nashville Fashion Forward Fund was the award, and it was amazing because it gave me the opportunity to travel internationally. When I was first given the award, I thought it was going to be like a monetary prize, and I remember having this conversation with Marsha and Connie, some of the co-founders of Nashville Fashion Week, and said, well, I really need some new computers for my office. And they're like all these things that I needed. And they're like, no, this has to be experiential. And I'm just such a pragmatic person that was so hard for me to come up with something to utilize that on. But then it actually wasn't hard in the end because I ended up going to Paris. So
well, there you go.
So it was amazing, and it was a great honor. And Nashville fashion has just evolved so much.
It really has.
Since I arrived in Nashville and to now, I'm even more proud to be a part of that history and that community. And I still feel very much a part of the Nashville community, even though I'm not physically there anymore.
Was all this in the very first Nashville Fashion Week?
No, I was a part of the inaugural Fashion Week in Nashville, but I want to say this was maybe their second or third year. I'm not positive for the award, but I was very humbled and thankful to be recognized for sure.
What have you been able to do with that recognition? I know you said you went to Paris and you described what it was intended for.
Right.
How did that springboard your endeavors?
Well, since then, I've gone back to Paris many times. I think it was sort of the beginning of the rest of my career in a lot of ways, because I wanted to act more globally. I wanted to source more globally. And so from just a practical standpoint, that's what it allowed me to do. I was able to attend their fabric trade show, I guess is what I would call it, and really meet with vendors that I'd been working with for a long time. But as far as a springboard, definitely provided more visibility, which was amazing. And they were right. There was a reason they wanted it to be an experience instead of just something to help fund your business. Is that those things really do help you develop as an artist, as a designer, as an entrepreneur, and that's what it did.
What was the experience? What was it intended to do for the winning designer?
It was intended to do whatever that designer wanted it to do for them.
I see.
There was no real, and I don't know how it's evolved since then, because this was, quite a few years ago. But, at that time, I had to have it approved through them of what I wanted to do. But it was something that was important for my trajectory. So I think that it just depended on what I saw as important for my business, if that makes sense.
It does. And from there, you launched your own line.
Well, no, I already had my own line.
Okay.
So I launched my company when I was 22, 23. I can't ever recall the exact age, but I was fresh out of college. So they were actually recognizing the work I had done with that company, which was Leona. No, I launched that fresh out of school.
So then you brought the line to Nashville Fashion Week, received the award, and then that further springboarded you. So it wasn't really a launch, it was a springboard.
Exactly.
Into the next steps,
yes.
Next phases.
Yes.
Where did it go from there?
From there, let's see. You're asking me to go back in time a little bit here. So from there, the Nashville fashion scene was just sort of starting to explode. And I was really excited to be a part of all of that. We really were able to establish a retail presence in 12 South, which, now is just booming and the biggest thing happening from a retail standpoint. And we were, one of the few on the beginning of that. And really, we made a lot of efforts to bring the neighborhood together and for it to be recognized as a retail hub in Nashville. So we were able to really grow the business because we got this local recognition. We were an international company already, but it's important that you have a strong connection with your headquarters, with that local community. Having
a flagship store from which you can fly your flag and then also branch out internationally.
Exactly.
So did the international aspect happen first?
Yes. So we were already sold in about 300 doors internationally, specialty retailers. Yeah, it was really kind of about the next phase of the business at that point, which was going more direct to consumer because we'd always been wholesale working through our retail partners. And this is our first opportunity to really be one-on-one with our customers, which was very exciting.
Yeah, that was a cute little shop.
Thanks.
It was very cool. What were some of those 300 doors around the country? Were they mom and pop independent retailers or were they chains?
A little bit of both, but predominantly mom and pop independent retailers.
The local boutique scene.
Mm-hmm. And all around, whether it was Tokyo or resort cities in the Caribbean, or it was everywhere. So it was a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah, and the line was gorgeous. I had it was a distinct honor to shoot several lookbooks for you, and it was just so cool to see the different color palettes that you pulled together and the textures and the silhouettes and all that stuff. Where did that come from? Where did that fashion design aesthetic for you come from?
Well, I born in Alabama, as you know, and
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Feel free to shout Roll Tide anytime you want to, because I know that the Crimson does that.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, definitely. So, the aesthetic of the brand and so much about the brand had to do with, where I grew up and what was around me at the time. Actually, a huge part of my decision to part ways with that business was that I had launched this company at 22 or 23, and I was creating something for that customer that I was surrounded with, young, Southern, maybe a little bit preppy, the prints and all of these things. And I kind of felt like I had outgrown her a little bit. Like I couldn't relate to her as much anymore. She was very much a part of who I was and who I grew up with, and a part of my DNA as a person, as a designer, but it wasn't authentically who I was on a deeper level. So it became more and more difficult for me, or more challenging for me, to design for that customer. Like I just had this desire to be more true to how I was feeling internally, if that makes sense. A lot happens in your life between 22 and, I don't know, however old I was, 30.
Yeah. So you, for lack of a better term, you just kind of outgrew that business aesthetic.
The aesthetic, yeah.
Your aesthetic moved on, and you didn't want to take Leona's aesthetic to where you were going.
It's hard to rebrand something that has a customer base.
That's true.
I had very happy customers that loved what I was designing, and I loved creating it for her. But at the same time, the fashion calendar is so rigorous, and we were delivering 12 times a year. That's essentially 12 mini collections a year. That's a lot of designing. And designing is like giving birth to something over and over and over again. And if it's not coming from a very, I hate the word authentic because it's so overused, but if it's not coming from a real place, then it's taxing creatively. It's no longer the total joyful experience that creating should be.
Right. So is it safe to say that it at one time was like an easy flow? It would just kind of happened organically, and then it became kind of drudge work?
I would say it was an easier flow for sure. I still had those moments of it, like, everything lighting up and, during that design process. But for the most part, I felt very tied to what I felt like I needed to create for my customer and for my stores, which there's always like a piece of that. Anytime you're creating a product, you really have to tweak your vision. But when it becomes that much, it didn't feel real for me anymore. The company was real, and the people that I worked with were real, and they all meant the world to me, but I couldn't create from that place. That's like a very different thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was curious because I did a little homework, and I saw where at one point, perhaps throughout the entire time, but your title for Leona was CEO. And I was surprised it wasn't like Chief Creative Officer. It was Chief Executive Officer. Was there some intentionality behind that?
There was really no intention behind that. It's actually kind of funny. I always think about being out with my husband or something, and he would introduce me as, "Oh, Lauren's a fashion designer," and that would always catch me off guard. I would say, "I'm a what?" I love to create and I love to design, and I've been doing those things my entire life. But first and foremost, I've always loved the big picture, so I would say, well, yeah, I design, but that's like, 10% of what I do. So,
right. Yeah, that's part of the overall vision that an executive would have.
Right.
The other part of that pie was you enjoyed like the building of the business.
Yeah.
The entrepreneurship of it.
Oh, 100%. Before I even knew I wanted to, design clothes or have a fashion company, I just knew I wanted to have a company. I was definitely interested in fashion and design, but I had a lot of interest growing up. And that was certainly one of the main focuses or main interests. But my first inclination has always been building something, really kind of seeing the big picture, even in like a part-time job or whatever in high school. It's just my nature is like not to do the job description, but, oh, well, why aren't we set up this way? We should, how do we make over the business top to bottom? And everyone would look at me like, who is this 15-year-old or 16-year-old? And
That's
why
great.
is she interested in these things? But that's just the way I've always thought.
So your initial track would have been entrepreneurship of something on some level.
Yeah.
And
right.
you landed into entrepreneurship in fashion design and happened to be an entrepreneur with style.
Yeah. My first declared major in college was interior design because I felt like that was more practical than fashion design.
That's funny you say that because I was totally going to guess that and use that as an example.
Yeah, that was what I first studied because I thought, well, fashion is not practical and art is not practical. And those are not things that can be real careers when you grow up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So I'll do interiors. And my mom was always very interested in interiors. And she had been letting me decorate my own bedroom. I mean, really call the shots since I was very young. I had a very adult bedroom at like the age of, 8 years old because I really enjoyed designing. And that just seemed like a practical choice. But then halfway through my college career, I switched over to fashion, and which was always an interest as well. So I've always had a lot of interest.
So your degree is in fashion or business?
My degree is in fashion, and I also studied studio art, and I also studied interior design. So
yeah, very cool. And we'll get to the studio art here in a little bit. That's interesting. And the reason I was kind of digging through there is because I'm in a similar situation where I come at my art, my creativity, my aesthetic through a business-minded side.
Right.
Because I did not go to photography school. I went to business school, and I came into photography mid-30s. So it was almost a pre-midlife career shift, but it was always there. Like you were saying that you decorated your room when you were really young. Photography and the right side of my head was still there, but I never really watered it. I went and tended the fields on the left side of my brain, and then through the astute wisdom of my wife, she's like, you know what? You should do this photography thing because I think you really, really dig it. So as you were telling that story, I was seeing some parallels in my track because I, started out on the business side, or I actually would call myself the CEO of my photography company also, because I do everything from soup to nuts, including the creative.
Absolutely. And I was actually thinking about you as I was waiting for your call tonight, and how you definitely are kind of like that left brain, right brain person, similar to me. And also, I mean, here you are, you've started this podcast.
Yeah, it is like a creative extension.
It's a creative extension, but I think that it's like a very outdated view that people have to follow this one cookie cutter path in their career, especially as entrepreneurs. And I used to sort of view people that were doing a million different things as sort of like, you just don't have your shit together.
Right. It's like, come on, make up your mind.
Like, make up your mind. You can't be like great at everything. But it's not about being great at everything. It's like we live in a world where you don't have to have one career if that's not what you want to do.
That is true.
And we live in, and we have this technology now. You can dabble in everything that you want to, and find the things that resonate with you and resonate with, your audience or whatever. And it's a wonderful thing. And I no longer look at, these people that are doing all of these different things as being, misguided. I look at it with a healthy envy. I'm like, this is great.
Yep. I get that.
This is wonderful.
We want to build things and then blow it up and then build something else,
Right.
or take it to its farthest degree and then, okay, it's run its course, torch it because I'm going to go do this now.
Right.
So it's not be good at everything, but be good at, well, it could be good at a lot of things, just maybe not all at one time.
Right.
For me, it does require some focus.
Right. Well, when focus is important, I'm very focused. But no, I was thinking about you before this, and yeah, I appreciate creatives or non-creatives, whoever, whatever you're doing in your life. I appreciate just being able to run after it if it's something that you're interested in and something that excites you.
How long did you consider closing Leona before you closed it?
Honestly, a few years.
Yeah.
to tell you the truth, because of that, it really wasn't like a business thing. It was actually, the reason I stayed in it is because the business was almost self-sustaining at that point. I had a really solid audience that I wanted to provide for. I felt unfulfilled, so I just knew that creatively that it wasn't sustainable.
Right. That makes sense. And would it be okay to say that I was picking up on that during our shoots?
Maybe, yeah.
I didn't fully know you, especially early on, because how many lookbooks did we shoot together? 3, 4, 5?
And that was towards the end,
Right,
that
right.
was in the last. We shot a lot together, but that was in the last few seasons. So I probably knew. I just wasn't sure. I didn't have like an end game. I wasn't planning anything. I just knew that my heart wasn't in it in the long run.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because even however many years ago that was, I think about those shoots every now and then, just because I get in my head, and if I'm trail running and I'm in my head, it just goes wherever it goes. And I kind of just let it wander, because I'm not looking out for cars. I'm not going to get hit by a dump truck. It's just, watch out for the rocks and roots. And when I run, that's my alone time. It's when I let my mind run free because my body's running free. And I will often end up drudging some memories, digging through some memories.
Mm-hmm.
And those shoots with you came to mind on a run within a couple months ago. And knowing where you are now, I could look back with the hindsight and go, you know what? I bet that when we were shooting those, I bet there was, and I know you said there wasn't an end game in mind, but I bet there was something cooking on the back burner that
Always.
This was winding down, that maybe you sensed it was winding down.
Yeah, no, I definitely knew that. I didn't know what, I had some ideas about what that next step was, but I wasn't really certain. So,
yeah, that's interesting. I'll dig through the archives and I'll pull up some shots from those lookbook thing and put it in the show notes so people can get an idea of what your line looked like. Because I thought it was fabulous. It was everything you described it with, Southern and preppy, but there was still chicness to it, and it was very feminine and it was elegant, and
thank you.
It was very cool.
Thank you.
Not something I expected to come from Alabama. Although from a deep south, southern genteel, southern charm sort of thing, it was completely Alabama.
Yeah, but not like in a, well, I tried anyway for it to not be like too stereotypical, all of
the Southern girls at my best friend's wedding.
Right.
With the flower hats.
Right.
Did you ever design with houndstooth?
Actually,
speaking of Alabama and Crimson Tide,
the way that I started my company was all through college. I worked for a store called The Shirt Shop in Tuscaloosa, which has been around since the 70s and is really just an iconic store in that college town. And I've been offered a job in New York City that was sort of like this amazing job that I was very excited about in the fashion world. And my plan was to move back the moment I graduated because I had like a course or two to finish. And as I'm finishing up that last semester, I am working in the store and doing the math about how am I going to survive in New York on this salary. Because I did not come from a background where I would have, extra support. Like I would really have to do it on my own. And I'm doing the math and going, oh my God, I'm going to like starve to death, literally. Like, I don't even know if I can like afford enough ramen to like sustain me on this and pay New York rent and all of this. And I quickly kind of came to the very disappointing, at that point in my life, a conclusion that just wasn't in the cards for me. So I was trying to come up with a way to make all of my dreams come true without doing that. And that was really, okay, well, I'm going to bring the fashion world to me. I'm going to do what I want to do without the years of experience and everything that, my original plan, which was, go work for someone for 5+ years and, figure out how they're doing it and then do it for yourself or whatever, which was still quite ambitious. But it was something that kind of came out of desperation. I said, well, I'm not going to give up my dream, so I'm going to find a way to start a fashion business somehow, some way. And I went to the guy I was working for, who has still been like a major part of my life and is super influential and incredible entrepreneur, Charles Sperlin, and said, what if I design some game day stuff? That's what we called it, game day fashion for the store, and will you sell it? And he said, absolutely. And I'll pay for the materials for you to be able to create whatever you want, and then we can work out the rest. And so I had no upfront costs. I was, making the patterns myself. I graded the patterns. I don't know if you know what that even means, but like you might, but that's actually like grading the sizes of the patterns. I did that by hand because I didn't have any money. So I was going to one of my old college professors and saying like, can you teach me how to grade a pattern? Because I need to like save this $200.
Right.
That's how desperate I was. And I had his seamstresses help me sew the samples. I sewed most of them myself, and it did really well. I don't really remember the numbers, but it did really well. And that was the money that I used to start Leona. I did that and I sold my car. And it was like, at the end of the day, something like $7,000 that I had left over just because, I was supporting myself. And so that was what I started the company with.
That's a great story.
And so, yes. That was all houndstooth.
So it was all houndstooth.
it was all houndstooth.
Like I never saw it in your line, but I didn't see like all of your lines. So I thought maybe early on Leona started with houndstooth.
I had designed so much houndstooth.
You were done.
I never want to design a houndstooth again. So.
Do you still wear it?
Do I still wear it?
Do you wear it on game day?
Houndstooth? I don't think I actually have. I like houndstooth. That's a very classic pattern. It's not, it's just totally timeless. I just don't happen to have any, but I actually just wear an Alabama sweatshirt that I've had since I was like 10 years old.
Nice.
On game day, so.
Nice. And what's your husband's college affiliation?
He is actually from my same hometown.
Okay, so you both bleed red.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's awesome.
We're really, really odd here in New York. So.
That's awesome. Tell me about the path from Alabama to Nashville to New York. There was Paris in there somewhere.
Well, I actually spent, I think, 3 or 4 years in Atlanta. That's where I launched my company. And so, I launched it out of like my parents' house for a few months. And the moment I had even barely enough to cover rent, I moved as quickly as I could, which was before I even delivered my first season. So, I lived in Atlanta for a while, and that's where it was a very pragmatic choice. I loved living there, actually, but it was centrally located within the Southeast. That's where I had my first customers. There's a great apparel mart, and then I met my husband, and we went back and forth on who would move where. And I said, look, I've been working 20 hours a day the whole time I've been living here. It's not like I have a life outside of my business. So I'll move there. You definitely have more roots where you are than I do. So that's when I moved to Nashville. That was amazing. We were there for, I think, 4 years. It felt like longer because I was visiting him long distance for such a long time while I was living in Atlanta. I already felt like a part of the community, but then we felt like it was a change, and New York made sense for both of our careers because he's in finance and, fashion. So this is sort of the epicenter.
Yeah, that's where else you gonna go?
Right. I mean, it was a no-brainer.
I mean, honestly. There are other places, but not,
of course,
not quite.
Not quite.
That's awesome. And Paris was in there as...
Paris was like a trip,
Okay, just trips.
That was the first time, I actually had to get a passport for that trip. That the Nashville Fashion Forward Fund, provided that trip for me, but that was the first time I'd ever needed a passport in my life. So it was a major moment for me to travel internationally. I mean, I was like, I've been dreaming about this my entire life. And I'm such a traveler at heart that it was huge. It was huge for me.
How many times have you been?
I don't even know. I've lost count because...
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah. If I had known this at that time, I would have chosen a different location with my fund award. I didn't know Paris was going to become such a major part of my career in my life. But, when I started working with Brandon Maxwell, which we haven't talked about, but I was going to Paris like a few times a year. So, yeah, I don't know. I've been... 8, 9 times. I'm not sure.
So why Paris and not Milan?
Paris is the epicenter of fashion in the world.
There you go.
Period.
There you go. I have yet to make it to Paris. It will happen. It just has not happened yet. We've been to Italy and a few other countries in Europe, but have not made it to France yet.
You have to go.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Okay, so you had mentioned Brandon Maxwell. So you go from CEO of Leona to COO at Brandon Maxwell.
Which is all semantics, really, because no one had the title of CEO. I was really operating as CEO for Brandon.
Okay.
He was really operating as creative director. It was the same role, especially in the beginning. I mean, I wasn't designing the collection. As the company grew, I had to build a team, and I've further siloed myself into more of an operational role because that's just the nature of what was needed. But it was building and managing that business. It was amazing.
So it took the left brain operations off of Brandon so he could focus on right brain.
Right.
How did you meet?
One of my very, very closest friends who actually went to Alabama, and then we lived in Atlanta at the same time, and now we live in New York at the same time. So we've sort of had this amazing serendipitous friendship where we just happen to end up in all the same places. But she's a mutual friend, and we met at her birthday party, and the timing was really perfect because I was in the middle of really winding things down with Leona, and he was in the middle of launching his company. And I think I joined him in November, and he had just had his first collection debut in September. So it was just like a couple months in to the formation of his business.
And how long were you there?
2 years.
2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a rather short window.
Yeah, I mean, it's all relative, A lot happened in 2 years.
Well, sure, yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I would imagine at the pace that a line like Brandon's would have, there's a lot crammed into that 2-year time window.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was explosive, so.
How many shows or lines did he release in that 2 years?
Oh, God. When I first started, we were only doing 2 major collections a year, and then we started doing pre-collections. So we were doing 4 collections a year. So I don't really know. Maybe 6. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Is he still going?
Oh yeah.
Good.
He's the new host on. The new judge on the new reboot of Project Runway on Bravo.
So. Oh well, that's cool.
Yeah.
I was unaware of that because we cut the cable cord when we moved.
Yeah.
So we followed Project Runway back when you and I were working together. But when we moved to this house 4 years ago, we just never reconnected cable for television. So I had not known that. So that's really cool.
Yeah. No, they're doing amazing, and I'm still in touch with really everyone on the team. And yeah, it's just another family.
That's awesome. Let's take a quick break for this episode's nonprofit spotlight, selected by our guest. Lauren has chosen Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation. Here's why.
I got involved with the Waxman Foundation, which is a cancer research foundation, a few years ago. Actually, it was right as I was winding down Leona, and I wanted to spend some time giving back. And they were making a lot of great progress in brain cancer research, and that's what they don't focus entirely on brain cancer. They focus on a lot of different types of cancer, but they are focused on collaborative research. And what Dr. Samuel Waxman has done is he has formed this amazing brain trust of doctors and scientists who are researching and really achieving incredible breakthroughs in new ways to approach treatments. And they've actually had some incredible landmark moments. And at that time, they were making a lot of progress in brain cancer specifically. And that's what brought me to them, because that's how I lost my own mother. But it's waxmancancer.org, and it's an incredible foundation, and I've really been able to see it from the inside, and they're real. I think we all kind of get nervous about like who to give our money to, and is it going where they say it's going? And this is real. This is no smoke and mirrors. The money is going directly to these doctors and scientists who are creating and researching better ways to treat cancers, or trying to understand why cancer is happening in certain, age groups or whatever. And it's really inspiring, and I've given back to them in the past, and I'll continue to do so, and I hope that your listeners will as well.
To learn more about Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation, please visit this episode's show notes at collectedclan.com/Lauren Phelps, where you'll find additional info about waxmancancer.org. Now let's return to our conversation with our guest, Lauren Phelps. So you mentioned your mother, and it has been obvious just following you on Facebook and getting to know you and your sister in person that your mother sounded like a really, really remarkable person. Tell me about her.
She was, and all children are biased of their parents, and everyone has these glorious stories to tell about those that have passed, but she was the real deal, and she was really just a spectacular person. I mean, there's so much I could say about her. I could fill an entire hour or two with everything I have to say about my mother, but she is the reason that I am who I am, that I do what I do, that I'm driven in the way that I am. I mean, from a very early age, very early, I remember her telling me, not in a cliche way, but in a very heartfelt way, you can do whatever it is that you want to do, and you will make a life for yourself, and you're not going to be dependent on someone else. And, this is what's important. And she was so dedicated to giving us a head start that she didn't have. I mean, she did not have an education. She did not come from a privileged background at all. And her whole life was about giving us all the things that she never had, never in a pushy way, just simply, I want you to be the best that you can be, but I'm going to let you steer this. And I'm so thankful that I ever had her. I mean, I don't even know how I could be a mother to Sam, my son, who is 7 months old, without having had her. I mean, if I can be a fraction of what she was for me, then I'm doing something right.
I remember seeing a photo you posted recently. It was a photo of your son, your infant son, looking at a photo of your mom. And what you said about the photo was, he knows her, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I felt that way when I was pregnant with him. I just felt this connection to my mother. And like she was a preschool teacher. Her gift was children. That was her gift in life. She could make anyone smile. She especially connected with children. She never met a stranger. She never judged anyone. She was just wanted people to feel good. She could definitely be irreverent and funny, but she was just loving. And the children in our neighborhood would flock to her. We had little kids that would come knock on our door growing up and say, we want to see Miss Johnny Faye. What kids in the neighborhood are coming to play with an adult? But that was like the connection that she had with children. She always talked about being a grandmother. So never in a pressure. I never felt pressure to do anything with my mother in my life, but like I knew that she very much looked forward to that moment should it happen. Something that I knew that she looked forward to. So it was heartbreaking when I first, found out that I was going to have a son and going to have this baby who would never know her, but at the same time, I felt she had a major hand in it all. And actually, I was on my little sister, Michelle, and we were on a beach trip together. And it was sort of like this trip we were supposed to take with my mom that we didn't get to take because she passed around that time. And we had talked about taking this trip together every year. Oh, we have to do this trip. We have to do this trip. And it was coming up on the 5-year anniversary. And I called my sister and said, we are doing this trip. Pause everything in your life. I don't care what's happening. This has to be the year that we do the trip. So we went and reminisced and had all this time together that we never had to grieve after her passing. And we didn't really grieve. We just celebrated who she was and did all the things that she would have wanted to do and listened to the music that she would have wanted to listen to and all of these wonderful things. And I had been telling everyone in my life, my husband who had been like begging me, it's time for a kid, it's time for babies. I was just like, no, now is not the time. And we got to the end of that trip and I said, Michelle, I know I'm ready to have a baby. And she said, what? And I said, yes, I feel like this whole moment, this whole trip, everything that we've shared is what I needed to like move forward, because we didn't live in the same place for very long after she passed. It was only like 2 months before I moved to New York. It was like very fast. So I was just quickly separated from everything. We never had that time together. I said, I didn't know at the time. It wasn't like a conscious thing that like, oh, I know I needed to have this. But we got to the end of that trip and I said, okay, like I'm ready to have a baby. Little did I know I was actually pregnant.
I was hoping you were going to say that. That's so exciting. I seriously was. You're sitting here telling the story. I'm like, please tell me you're already pregnant when you're on this trip.
Yeah, I was a week pregnant. I was like barely pregnant, but I was pregnant.
I love it.
So
I love it.
It was just like, but I just feel like she had such a hand in it from like the get-go. I think she was like, okay, Lauren, like, she was kind of gently pushing me, like, go have this time with your sister. Like these moments, are far and few between. Like your time is running out in a way. And it was amazing. And so, no, I feel like she's been there all along. I totally feel like Sam knows her. So...
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. That's how that story ended, because as you were telling it, that's how I ended it in my mind.
Sorry, I'm a little long-winded. So
No, that's good. That's fantastic. I want to stay on this motherhood thing for a little bit, because I'm curious how, now being a mother for these handful of months that you have been, how has that impacted your work and what you do and your world?
Well, I've always been a little bit of a workaholic. So it has been this force that like you can't deny, or I couldn't deny. Everyone has their own lives, their own ways, and their own, what feels right to them, and that's wonderful. But for me, it was definitely like this force that I felt like, okay, this is time to put on the brakes, which is saying a lot for someone that has always worked the hours that I have and has always just been sort of all or nothing. And that's, that's a big reason why that I left Brandon. I just felt like this something is forcing me, not that motherhood was forcing me to resign from my job, or that I felt like I couldn't do it all. It wasn't about that. It was like, there's this other thing that is forcing me to like recognize something happening beneath the surface. Like I need to take a step back and figure out what that is. And, no one can prepare you for what it's like to be a parent, which I know that you probably can relate to that.
Oh yes.
No one can tell you. Everyone says you have no idea what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what it's going to be like.
That's why there are no books written on that single topic.
No, it's impossible. And it's just incredible. There have been very trying times, but honestly, I feel so grateful. I mean, he's such a dream. He's not perfect, but he's perfect. And I think that's how every parent feels about their child, right?
Yep.
Like, it's like this perfection that it's like why the word perfection was invented. There is no perfection, but there is perfection in your child.
Yep. That's a good way to explain it.
It's that type of love. It's amazing. It's amazing.
That it is. And should you decide to do it a second time or a third time and catch up with us, it takes on, like, it's just another layer, and then it's another layer. I heard it described as another room built onto the house of your heart.
Right. It's
where
like I
where
can't
you
even
make room for
imagine
someone
loving
else.
a second child.
Yes.
As much as I love Sam, but at the same time, you know it's possible because
Yes.
I've like witnessed it.
Yes.
I witnessed my mother loving my sister and I both unconditionally and both the same and both so differently.
Yes.
So I've seen it, but it's so hard to imagine when you have this being in your life that you love more than you ever knew was possible. And you're like, really? I can really love something else the same as you?
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Well, it's similar to the room that was built on when he came.
Mm-hmm.
Another one will be built on if the next one comes.
Right.
So it's not that you have to divide the current volume of love and intimacy for that person. You gain more love and intimacy
Absolutely.
as you gain another person. There was a guy that spoke into me, and he didn't even realize he did it. He knows it now because I've told him repeatedly. But years ago, okay, so Megan and I waited. We were married 11 years before our first child was born.
Really?
Yes. And that was by design.
Well, you both still look like babies. So good for
That was
you.
on. Well, that's all her fault. I look young-ish, sort of. Not really, just because I have to keep up with her. And I was talking to him one morning. We were having breakfast, and we were still a couple years away from having kids. And he was telling me about his boys and all this stuff. I was like, dude, I just cannot even imagine what it's like to be a family, or to have a family and be responsible for another person, their well-being, their livelihood, all that stuff. And I was getting my freelance career off, so it, just like we've never really been rolling in it, but we certainly weren't rolling in it then. So it literally was I was griping about not having the means for something that we wanted. And he waved his hand, he stopped me, he's like, hold on. I need you to know that every baby brings his own loaf of bread. And that
so
just really resonated with me. And that was a calm and a soothing feeling. It was like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we are closer than we think we are.
Right.
And I can attest to that. Every one of my children has brought their own loaf of bread. And it's been remarkable.
Yeah. No, because there's something magical about the way you learn to operate, right?
Yes.
Like it's like I can't work on the weekends right now because I can't, but I just learn to operate, and they just bring so much love and so much into your life that like they bring their own loaf of bread. I love that.
They do.
That's
Isn't that a
amazing.
great saying?
Yeah, I know, it's amazing.
I love that. I've been kind of, I don't want to say Facebook stalking, but I mean, it's out there. We're friends, we're connected. You post photos, I post stuff. We see each other. We see things. And I can tell that you are a creative at heart because you also use words really well. For example, that he knows her, I'm sure.
Right.
That was a very simple, but it's a very poignant caption to that photo. Another one I remember seeing, and this is actually one that kind of put you on my, I need to have her on my show radar. It was a photo of you right after his birth, and you're just, radiant new mom glow, which is just magic. I remember that with Megan. It's a very cool thing. And you said in the caption, worth it. And suddenly it all makes sense. What made sense?
Everything. It's like the culmination of life, right? It's like, and I'm sensitive about that because I don't want anyone that doesn't have kids to feel like I'm saying they're missing out on something. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if it is a part of your life, then it just suddenly all makes sense. There are no words for it, honestly. If you choose not to have children, if you can't have children, you can live the most fulfilled life. It's not like that. But for me, and I know for so many others, like suddenly it all makes sense. Your life up until now, your how you want to move forward, your partnership, your struggles, your triumphs, like it all has like a whole other level of meaning. Does that make sense?
It really does. Yes. It really does. Yeah, I was just curious what all meant in that moment to you. And I just
come out of like a really grueling labor and like things that you don't want to talk about in a podcast, and I don't either.
Yeah.
But that's all very surface stuff. That's not really what I was talking about. It's just it all makes sense. For me in my life, everything that you've gone through, my relationship with my mother, losing my mother, my relationship with my father, like all of those complications and like all of those layers of love and struggle and ambition and all the things that we're chasing in life, like it's like that thing that brings you back to say, this is life. And for me, I'm the type of person that like, I needed that.
Yeah, this is life with a capital L.
Yeah.
It has now become even more sacred than it already was.
Right.
Were you pregnant when you left Brandon Maxwell?
Yeah, I was, I want to say I was
Or was he already born?
No, I was pregnant.
Okay.
I don't remember how many months. Maybe I was 5 months.
Okay.
6 months, somewhere around there.
Did that inform your decision to move away from Brandon Maxwell Company and into your thing? Or was it just time to move from Brandon Maxwell
I think it all kind of just came together.
Yeah.
Like I don't like to say it was the pregnancy. I don't like to say it wasn't. I just think that there are so many factors into any decision that we make. And I'm not the type of person who would say, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm going to take a step back from my career. That's not who I am at all. And that's great if that's who you are. Fantastic. I'm not saying that in any sort of way, but for me, that's not what it meant for me. For me, it just meant all of these things are lining up and these things are happening career-wise and personally. And yeah, I mean, it was good timing. I don't know.
Yeah, well, things line up.
This is Collected Clan. Thank you for listening to these conversational biographies about real life with relatable guests. We operate on a listener-supported system, so the conversations remain honest and real without beholding to companies or products. Instead of interrupting the show with paid advertisements unrelated to our mission, we prefer to promote non-profit organizations. If you find value in what we're doing here on Collected Clan, please visit our website at www.collectedclan and click the support tab to learn how you can financially support this show for as little as $5 a month. Thank you for your support. And now, back to this conversation.
At this point, you've left Brandon Maxwell, and tell me about what you went to.
What are you doing now?
Right after I resigned, I was pregnant. I actually had some job offers right before I left, but these are job offers from people, doing the same role, CEO or COO or whatever, for other luxury fashion labels. And of course, they didn't know I was pregnant when they were offering me these things, and I wasn't seeking out other opportunities. It's just the nature of what happens. And so I knew that those were options, but I knew that I also wasn't interested regardless of my pregnancy. And I didn't know why, and it didn't really matter to me why. I just knew that I needed to do something else at that moment in time, but I didn't know what that was, and I was pregnant. So it's not like if I went into any job interview situation, or they would immediately say like, oh, like whether they could actually say it or not.
Well, they can't say it.
That's not an ideal time to start. It's just, that's life. And so art has always been a huge part of my life. And my mother was an artist. My father is an artist, not by trade or profession, just they are. I think it's just something that you are, whether you declare it or not. And so I was, painting and drawing and with my mother before. It's been a part of my life as much as anything is a part of my life. So I really wanted to take some time to get back to that. And I started taking some classes locally, and I did a painting for Brandon for his birthday, and I started getting a lot of purchase requests and that sort of thing, and it just sort of all happened organically. So now I'm working as an artist, I'm selling my work, but for me the art is like my sacred place, and I don't want it to ever not be, because that's when it becomes something that I don't want it to be in my life. I don't want it to become where I feel like I'm creating for a brand or I just want it to be this therapeutic thing in my life, but also I'll protect that for the people that want to share in that with me. I want to make sure that their investment is a sound investment. I mean, I take it seriously. I'm not just playing or dabbling. Like it's a serious thing in my life. At the same time, I just don't want it to come at it from that place. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
So, I want to create something that is, I'm painting and I'm doing mixed media art, and it has a lot of meaning for me, but it's not about that for someone else that might find beauty in it. It's about whatever they see in it. And it's been amazing. I mean, it's like the whole process of it is just, it's something that I've always enjoyed. It's always been a part of my life. I feel very blessed that it can fill this part of my life and will always be a major part of my future. It's, just disappointed that I let it not be a part of my life for such a long time, because it is an extension of me and it always has been. So I feel like I almost turned my back on art for a long time, and I'm really excited to get back to it. And I'm thrilled that people are finding something that, gives them joy, or, that they're finding something that resonates with them in it.
Yeah, it's a very cool pieces. I've enjoyed seeing what you've shared and cruising on your website too.
Thank you.
I dig them a lot. How do you choose the various media when you do a mixed media piece, and why do you choose those?
Well, the whole thing kind of started off very organically because I had a bunch of leftover fabrics from my time with Leona, actually, and I had them here, and I started playing with them on canvas and or on wood, or attaching them to whatever. And there was this particular textile that had an open weave, and I didn't have to glue. It was a very organic process. If I painted through it, it became a part of the work, and then I could utilize all of my knowledge of fabric techniques. I mean, I have all of that design background, so I could pleat it, I could fray it, I could do all of these things with it and incorporate it into my art. So it wasn't something that I oh, what's my, what's my vision for it? Just, it just happened. And now I'm sort of like addicted to it, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like the texture and the building of it, which is no surprise given my background.
That makes sense too.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen a series of various shapes overlain across each other.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen figure studies,
Mm-hmm.
both paint only and mixed media. What's your creative process like in determining what goes on to that canvas? Do you do things in series, or do they just kind of, let me explore this idea, and then, okay, I'm going to do 5 or 6 more, and then I'm going to explore another idea and do 5 or 6 more, or do you go back and forth?
I kind of go back and forth because I feel like it depends on where I am creatively. And that's the beauty of what I'm doing right now. I'm not following a formula, but I'm also just sort of organized in thought anyway. So sometimes I just need a day where I'm not thinking about anything and I'll go in and play. But the majority of the time, I'm searching for something. So I will start working on multiple pieces at once that have like the same origin of thought, whatever that is, a collection, a series, whatever you want to call it. I really go back and forth. Depends on where I am.
Well, it's really cool stuff. I'll pull some photos of some key pieces, put in the show notes. We'll share those and all that. I want people to see it because it's really cool. And I love the muted color tones. It's actually very New York.
I feel like it's, pulling it all together. I feel like it's New York. I feel like it's architectural, but I also feel like there's something raw about it that feels like a part of the South.
Do you see brighter, vibrant colors coming into future pieces, or do you think you'll stay with the muted naturals and then the stark black and white?
Well, I love this monochromatic. I love in fashion. I love things that are monochromatic, like a full look, and there's just like an impact to that. I was creating from a lot of that's from like our family lake house. I was in this like very serene surroundings, so that kind of came through in the work that the color palettes has this sort of organic and natural feel. But I think that I also, love really graphic things as well, like a lot of contrast, like black, with, paired with, white and blue and green or whatever it is. And there's some of that when I was starting this time last year, I guess, when I was kind of figuring out what direction I wanted to go artistically. So, yeah. At this point in my life, it's like never say never about anything, whether it's like a life choice or something in art or something in career, like just never say never.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons I resonate with the monochromatic stuff that you're doing currently is because of my deep, deep, deep affection for black and white photography.
Yeah.
A lot of my personal work, I've just stripped the color out of it. We don't live in a black and white world. I know we live in a colorful world, and it's beautiful. But there's something about pulling out the distraction of color where everything becomes about the subject of the photo. Because, like for a bridal portrait, for example, there's not a bouquet of red flowers that's going to compete with the actual subject of the photo, which is not the dress, the girl in the dress.
Right. No,
but
totally.
and if it were color, it's like where's my eye gonna go? Well, it's likely gonna land on this red bouquet of flowers, unless, well, one, I rarely have bouquets in bridal portraits that I do because there needs to be no competition of beauty. It's all about the girl. And if there were, then I would strip the color out, and then it again becomes about the girl, and she's just got this standard wedding day prop. Obviously, in commercial work, when you're working for a client, doing a black and white lookbook of a Leona seasonal line, that would not make sense. Right. So there are times when color is necessary, but for my work, for my freelance work, for my personal work, I just love stripping out the color and just taking it down to this is the essence of what is in this photograph, whether it's a client, a person, or my child, or a landscape, or whatever. There's something about monochromatic, and maybe it's that combined with it's the real world, but it's different than the actual world.
Right.
Makes it somewhat of a fantasy of sorts.
With photography, for sure. Yeah. It's like, I mean, painting is all fantasy. So it also depends on what your focus is, right? If you want it to be composition, if you want it to be shapes, if you strip it down, then the focus is what you want it to be. And that's with what I'm doing. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in texture and shape and composition right now. And I don't want the distraction to be 50 colors in a work, or 5 colors in a work. I want it to be about these other things, or maybe it's about the brushstroke, or maybe it's about the little bit of play or transparency, or having to search through the work to see whatever it is, the reflection of something showing on the other side of the canvas. Or, I mean, there's a lot of different directions you can go with it, but that's kind of why the monochromatic makes sense to me. And I can definitely see why you're drawn to it right now as well.
Yeah. I love talking to artists. I really do. Yeah, it's fun. I have often said that my creative envy is painting. So I have a deep admiration for visual artists who are painters, largely because I suck at it.
Mine's singing. It's not visual art, but it's like another art. And if I could sing.
Yeah. I will say in some hope that I currently suck at it, because I actually intend to try to learn the craft of painting, because I've always loved it. And one of the reasons I was drawn to photography is because I could put all of that visual aesthetic and how to confine something to a rectangle or a square, how to compose things. I can put that inside the lens of a camera and let the camera do the drawing, if you will, do the recording of the drawing. But at some point, I'm going to sit my butt down and try to study the craft of doing that with brushes and paint and a canvas.
Honestly, so am I. I really haven't focused on the craft. It's been more about the art. So that's one of my goals as well. So.
But it's working for you. When I have tried to I'll just call it wing it, and go in and just make something happen, it just looks like spaghetti.
But no artists are totally winging it. Maybe if they've been it for many, many, many years and have really honed their craft, and they've earned that ability to just totally wing it. But even then, I doubt it. I think there's a lot more intention than any artist would have you believe.
Yeah, that's true. I set a goal a few years ago of painting 3 paintings. And by the time I think it was December 29th rolled around, I finished the 3rd. So I actually have attempted it. Granted, it was a couple years ago, and they were small, 8 by 6 inch, just little tiny things. I just wanted to practice getting paint on a utensil, whether it was a brush or a knife, and putting it on the canvas and seeing if I could make it look interesting or into a shape or whatever. So
right.
I need to revisit that. But my current creative outlet is what we're doing right now.
Well, I love that. And I never knew you had such a voice for this. No, really. I was listening to some of your other conversations, and I was like, that is him. And that's the way he's always sounded. And this is such a natural thing for you to be doing.
Well, that's good to hear, because I'm having fun with it. And one of the reasons I love portrait photography also is because you're not just photographing the person in front of the lens, the form in front of the lens, but you're photographing the person in front of the lens. And there's so much more to that person than what he or she walks in the door with. That's visibly apparent. When you take the time to have a slow portrait session and you could really drag that personality out, that's done through conversation, and that's done through relationship and knowing things about each other. And then, you get that magic moment. There's a one of my favorite scenes. I'm going to get like total chick flick geeky here. If you haven't seen it, there's a movie called Somewhere in Time. It stars a very young Christopher Reeve and a very young Jane Seymour.
Amazing.
And she plays like an old, elegant. It's set up up north, so it's not like a Southern Belle thing. But she's a theater actor, like an actress in a play, stage actress, and she falls in love with this Christopher Reeve character. And backstage, in the intermission of one of her plays, she has to sit for a headshot. And it's one of those old 8x10 view cameras, where the guy's got to get under the black hood and hold the flash stick up. It's set back in the early 1900s. And this photographer is trying to just, okay, let's have a little frill, let's get a little light in your eyes, it's everything that a photographer would do to direct somebody to get a reaction. And when Christopher Reeve's character simply walks behind the photographer and she looks up at him and lights up, and it was the softest smile. And that's when the photographer got it. I was like, yeah, good try, buddy, but it wasn't really about what you were doing. It's about what she brought to the camera.
Right.
So this is a non-photographic version of that.
Oh, I love that.
That's what I love about doing these calls and pulling these podcasts together and telling other people's stories, because it's kind of it's like an audio portrait, if you will.
Definitely. I love that.
You must find that movie and watch it, because I think you would love it.
Oh, I absolutely will.
The music is great too.
Yeah, and great talent in that. So
yes.
I'm excited to check it out.
Yep. If you could have one more conversation with your mom, what would you talk about?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard. That is just really, where would I begin? It's been so interesting having a son and knowing so little about this part of my life, like what her experience was with me as a baby, because you don't have those conversations with your parents, right? You don't talk to your kids about, it's always, oh, this is what the day of your birth was like. Those are the things that you talk about, but it's not like this overarching experience of what it's like to become a parent and how scary it is and how incredible it is. And I would want to have that conversation with her. I mean, there's so many conversations I'd want to have with her, like countless. But I would want to get deep with her on a level that you usually don't get to have those conversations with your parents and say, no, really, really, what was that like? Like, I was your firstborn and she was 19 years old, and what was that for her? Because now that I'm a new mom, I have a new appreciation for what that might have been, but I really don't know what that experience was like for her. And it shaped my life, obviously. Sure, it shaped hers.
I'm sure it did. Oh, that's good. Well, this has been fantastic, as I anticipated it would be.
This was so fun. It was
Aren't they fun? The only thing that would make it funner is, I just quoted Reese Witherspoon, is, speaking of Sweet Home Alabama, is if these were in person.
Oh, absolutely. And if there was more time for me to ask you everything that I want to know about your, because really that's what I like to do in conversation as well. I'm very curious about others. So
one day we could make that happen somehow.
Yeah. Thank you again.
This was awesome.
Yes.
There you have it, a real-life conversational biography with Lauren Phelps. For more of these conversations, subscribe now at collectedclan.com/follow or at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to never miss an episode. It's free to listen. Pop over to collectedclan.com/Lauren Phelps for photos of her work and additional info related to this episode. What did you love about this episode? I'd love to hear from you. Drop us a note or a voice message. Your thoughts and feedback are always welcome. Our email address and phone number are also in the show notes. And a big shout out to my friends Worldwide Groove Corporation for this episode's original music. The song is Mimosa from their album Chillidiziac Lounge Volume 1. Check out more of their music at worldwidegroovecorporation.com. Thank you again for listening. Now go be you.